So hi everybody, I'm thrilled to be here and speaking to all of you. My name is Tom Lynch and I am the Career Development Manager on the Boston campus. I currently work with the Master of Finance students and also the Bachelor students, the undergrad students. We call them BBAs, so Bachelor of Business Administration. This is my 4th academic year and I'll be going into my 5th in the fall. Prior to Hult, I have a background in accounting within educational travel, and then moved on to more of a creative role in marketing as a marketing manager within IT. And so throughout that period, I did work abroad. I ended up getting my master's abroad, and that's what helps with that transition period. So I'm able to kind of combine both of those experiences, both functional and industry, and working with students like yourselves on career exploration, strategy, and finding that job that is fulfilling for you as my current role is for me. And I love what I do. I know Sarah's going to say the same thing. We love meeting with you. We love talking with you and brainstorming, career exploration, whiteboarding, and just having those conversations and supporting you the best that we can. And so today we're excited to kind of share some insights with you and give you a little bit of a taste of some of the strategy that we hope to work with you on, hopefully this fall.
Yeah, great. And my name's Sarah Cotterill. I'm a career development advisor at our London campus, working with our undergraduates. So yeah, like Tom said, I love what I do. What brought me here was quite a mixed background. So I've had a past life as a consultant in market research. So it was a really exciting time for me. Worked across lots of different types of clients, lots of different industries, learned a lot. But definitely through that experience, I became really passionate about education through the clients that I worked for. And that really inspired me to want to work with students like yourself and help them develop their own career pathway. So as you can probably tell, I'm from New Zealand with my accent, so I'm from the other side of the world. That journey brought me over here to London. So I've worked with quite a few different international study abroad programs, you know, helping international students find internships and graduate opportunities here in the UK, which has been an amazing time being part of their development and supporting them through their work life. And yeah, a big highlight for me was working with Hult students, which what brought me here. I've always enjoyed seeing a Hult CV in my hands, working with Hult students. So it definitely led me to this amazing job, which, as Tom said, we really, really love. So that's a little bit about me.
All right. Great, thanks, Sarah. So we're going to talk a little about the agenda. This will go through. Sorry about that. So, as you can see, the session today is about, you know, acknowledging the fact that the landscape is changing. And then we want to kind of pose that question. Yes, it's changing, but how's your strategy, right? And so this is going to be a lot about remote work. And what that entails. So we're going to talk a little about remote work and some market trends. They're going to go into what companies are actually looking for. So when you think about remote work, especially now in a time of COVID-19, what are companies looking for at the moment? In addition to that, what are the skills that you need in order to fulfill those business needs? And then how do you get them? So we realize that you may not have all of them at the moment, and that's absolutely okay. But what we're gonna do today is shed some light on what those skills are, and then talk a little about how to either get them or enhance them. And then at the end of the day, you gotta communicate your value. So once you know what company is looking for, you know what skills you need, and now you have them, how do you make sure people know you have them, right? And so we're gonna talk through those 3 pieces. So when it comes to remote work, many of you may already, know this, and many of you may already have experience in this. But just very simply stated, it's working outside the traditional office environment. So a perfect example of remote work is what Sarah and I are doing right now, right? So she's in London, I'm in Boston. We're both working remotely from our homes, our home office, and delivering this presentation to you, which is fantastic. And I love that, you know, technology has allowed us to do this. You know, we didn't really miss a beat, really. You know, we hopped right onto Zoom and we're able to deliver these presentations to all of you. So with that said, when it comes to remote work, you know, your teams may be dispersed geographically, right? So you're going to see a lot of international teams, people from all around the world potentially working together. And with that comes a lot of pros and cons. There's some challenges that may come from that. So I want you to be a little bit aware of, you know, the fact that your team might be geographically in different locations, and then the fact that you rely heavily on technology. So if it wasn't for Zoom, we would be having this session right now. So knowing how to, you know, really work some of these technologies is really important for remote workers.
Great. So let's look at some market trends so we can start to develop an understanding of remote working and how it's impacting the job market at the moment. Okay. So remote working, I mean, it's always been around, even before the event of the pandemic. I think, you know, obviously we've had to do a lot to, as Tom said, a lot of us are pivoting, we're working at home now, but even before then, it was a huge part of the job market and working life. So what we can see here, even at the start of this year, 2020, there were 4.7 million people in the US already working remotely, which is a huge chunk of the population. And in fact, that had increased by 140% since 2005. So we can see that's a huge growth in terms of people working from home. And as Tom said, you know, there's lots of variables that have made that happen. For example, technology has really helped us to do that. And it's become a really desirable part of working life. So there's a lot of research that has shown it increases employee satisfaction, it increases efficiency, and companies really love it because it helps to attract a global pool of talent when they hire. And on the company side, you know, it's something that's really increasing as well. So the statistic here at the beginning of this year, there was 16% of all companies that were remote only. So only employed remote workers. And this year, 52% of the population globally were already working from home at least once a week. So that's half of the workforce already working from home. So this is really showing us how prevalent it has been. Cool. Now, how's it changed? So particularly since COVID-19 has hit, how has that impacted the job market and the way people work? Well, LinkedIn has some really great statistics that show us how prevalent it has affected jobs and how people had to respond to the current conditions. So what we can see in the top bar, this is how people are searching for work. So people using the remote job filter has increased by 43%. So that's a huge jump again. And at the same time, just below it, people searching using those keywords, remote working, work from home, that's jumped up 42%. And then at the bottom, it's been reflected by the companies and the opportunities that they're posting to the public, the people they're trying to find. So the share of job postings that are marked as remote or work from home, that's increased by 28%. So that's given us a huge insight about how people are searching for work just since March alone. Cool. So what does this mean for the future? Well, these statistics that you can see here, this is from before COVID-19 happened. So these are the future employment trends that were predicted. So as you can see, by 2028, it was predicted that 73% of all teams will have remote workers. So that's huge. That's, you know, almost every team will have someone working remotely. And there below, you can see that they've predicted 24% of all workplace headcounts being flexible working. So temporary workers, people working from home, agency workers. So it's really showing that diversification in terms of working styles. And so we do need to remember these statistics are before the pandemic. So obviously they've been influenced by different things. So a big one are the future generations, millennials, Gen Zs, the way they think, how they like to work. This is very much reflective of that. Our younger generations are known for being quite agile, quite flexible, adaptable. They're doing side gigs, they're starting their own businesses, they've got their hustles. So this really shows that, and they're stepping into those manager roles, right? They're bringing those work habits into the workplace. And again, you know, thinking about it being such an appealing area of work life that, you know, is really driving that increase. So this could look very, very different after the pandemic. And there's no exact numbers on that. It's all very unknown at the moment, but we can predict that that would definitely increase. So, you know, lockdown restrictions have happened all over the world, and it meant that businesses had to quickly adapt. Businesses are thinking, okay, we've proven we can do it. You know, now they're thinking about, how does this affect our budgets, our resources? You know, how do we design our workplaces? Do we need an office? So you can only imagine this is just going to increase over time. And in fact, a great example of that is, you might have seen in the news last week, Twitter. They just announced that they are allowing their staff to work from home moving forward indefinitely. So even when the pandemic's over, that option is open to them. So that's really showing how it's shaping it and how we can anticipate it to increase even more. Thanks, Tom. Cool. Okay, so what does this mean for me? So as a candidate in the job market, how can you use this information? How is it going to benefit you? Well, understanding the remote work landscape, what it's going to look like, you can really use that knowledge to optimize your job search. So the number one way it's going to help you be strategic. And this is something we always encourage in our coaching on campus, is having a strategic job search plan. To do that, you really do need to understand your market and what those future trends are. So this information is going to really help you with that. When you do that, you can really position yourself for employers to attract their attention, which we'll talk to a little bit more. But that's definitely going to help you communicate your value. What are your strengths? What are your skill sets? And it's always beneficial, I like to call it, to think like an employer, put their hat on. When they look at you as a candidate, they look at your CV, they look at your LinkedIn, what are they thinking? Well, they're probably going to be thinking, how is this person going to help me make sales? How is this person going to keep my clients happy? Especially when they're all remote right now, you can't see them face to face. How is that person going to help me improve my processes, get things done on time? So basically, what it comes down to is, what problems are you helping businesses to solve? And especially in this unique remote work environment, it comes with its own set of challenges and it needs its own unique skills. So that's something we're going to dig into now. So thanks, Tom.
Yeah, perfect. So when you think about being strategic and you think about how do I communicate my value, there's a few steps we want to walk you through. Right? So the first thing you really need to do is identify what are companies looking for in remote workers, right? It's that kind of market awareness, or that understanding the market that Sarah was talking about. And that is super, super important. And just before I kind of move forward to kind of get you in the right frame of mind, some of the things that we're going to talk about, at the end of the day, like, we would love for you to find a job that you truly love and are good at. You also need to factor in what Sarah said in terms of what are the problems that the businesses need solved. And so you need to kind of marry those two and be as strategic as you can while trying to factor in the jobs and tasks that you truly enjoy doing. And so the more knowledge you have of what's going on in the market, the better positioned you can be moving forward. And that's what it's all about. So here are just a few. This is not a comprehensive list, but these are some of the current requirements that we are now seeing in current job descriptions. Again, this is just a sample, but definitely worth noting to you guys. But I'm going to run through them pretty quickly. But a self-starter and being capable of working independently. So as you can imagine, working remotely in your home office or coffee shop is very different from being in a team environment physically where you're sitting next to your team or sitting across from your supervisor or manager. So making sure that you can get those things done, can start initiatives, and can work independently without too much direction. A native level of fluency in a language other than English. Sarah touched upon this as well, but this remote work has allowed teams to be a lot more global. And you will see that in the next couple of years that these teams, you'll be working with people from all around the world. And so having additional languages under your belt or having that ability is incredibly important. So that's something that companies are certainly looking for. Willing to be an agent of change. I love this one. And this can be written in so many different ways. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on, but having the ability to be adaptive or change with the market or be solutions oriented is not always easy. For example, when this COVID-19 happened, we had to pivot very quickly and we had to go very virtual, not only academically, but, with careers and having our seminars and webinars and one-on-one appointments, everything had to switch very quickly. And so when you think about being an agent of change, like how can you adapt to something and create a positive out of something? And so that's what we kind of mean with being an agent of change. And that's something companies would really value now because there's a whole bunch of challenges that come with what's happening right now. And they want people to be able to solve these problems. Having a sense of empathy and interest in the people around you. So this goes to kind of the greater discussion of communication skills, or soft skills, or human skills, as we call them sometimes. And that is really, how can you work with people virtually, but also be empathetic and make sure you communicate effectively and appropriately all the time. And it's not always easy, right? So you need to have that sense of empathy because there's a difference between communicating virtually or communicating via email or instant message through chats versus an in-person conversation. It changes the dynamic and it changes the way people receive information, especially when you're dealing with people from all around the world with different cultures and backgrounds. This sense of empathy and interest in the people around you is become, in my mind, and correct me if you disagree, Sarah, but it becomes paramount, I think, right now. Super, super important. Generally having experience working remotely, companies are really looking for that as well. Do not worry if you do not have any experience working remotely, it's okay. And we'll talk about some ways on how you can, enhance those skills and showcase that you've done some of these things as well. And I've already talked about this, but experience working within international teams. Here at Hult, that is kind of an everyday occurrence from people all around the world. Teamwork is incredibly important and it's built into the curriculum here. And so, that is something that you would do here on a regular basis and is, very, very important. So now that we've kind of talked about, what are the demands and what are companies looking for at the moment, now you have to identify, what are the skills that are needed to address these demands, address these needs, and how do I get them? Before we tell you what we think, we want to hear from you. So if you can leverage that chat box that Sarah talked about at the beginning of the webinar, please put in what you think are the most important skills required for remote work at the moment. And again, don't be shy. Feel free to put in whatever you think. Yeah. This is a safe
And don't
space.
forget to make sure you have your all participants button on as well.
Yes.
So we can all share and benefit from your ideas.
Let's see if you guys can top the previous group. They got a lot of the ones that we had on our next slide for you.
All right, now we're looking at live. Okay, so yep, tech skills, operating softwares effectively, absolutely. Flexibility, business acumen, adaptability, a sense of patience, lovely understanding between your virtual team. It kind of ties into the empathy piece.
Yep.
Yeah, basic tech skills. It definitely is a core foundation requirement of remote working.
Yeah.
Self-learning growth, having an open mind, soft skills, sharing feedback and progress regularly. Yeah, great. Definitely feeds into excellent communication.
Yep.
Discipline, it's a big one. Tech savvy and analytics. Ability to coordinate, absolutely. Finding a balance, empathy, proper use of collaborative tools, ethics, skills to solve problems when help is not immediately available. Absolutely. You know, you're not sitting opposite your peers. You can't bounce off them straight away. You need to be self-aware. Yep, see what situations you can and can't work at home, problem solving, punctuality, absolutely. Open-mindedness. Punctuality is definitely still a thing. I think people forget about that one when they're not going into the office environment. Assertiveness. Great. Any other thoughts, guys? These are excellent. Discipline. Yep, it definitely takes a lot of discipline and remote work to make sure you're still meeting your targets and your deadlines.
Yeah, perfect. I think it's pretty close on who got more, this group or the prior group. Yeah. It's neck and neck. You guys both fantastic. So I'm going to share with you now some of the skills that we have seen that are very in demand that will help address the needs that the companies are, going through at the moment. So many of you said tech savvy, right? That is super, super important. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do remote work without it. So being able to work through Zoom and Skype and Slack and Microsoft Teams and many other platforms allows you to be able to communicate and be productive in your job. Now that's just to communicate with your team. There's many other platforms out there that actually allow you to do the other aspects of your job, such as Microsoft Excel and other Microsoft products and analytics tools, right? I know someone had talked about analytics and mentioned that in the chat, and that's a bit of another conversation, but that's something that's growing very much in popularity. And so those are just in general for your job search important to know if that's of interest to you. Ability to troubleshoot, right? So we talked about that as well. Not always being able to just to quickly say, hey, I have a quick question. Can you help me for a second? Remote work is a little bit different. And so being able to be independent and troubleshoot is a skill, believe it or not. And it's something that you can certainly work on. Time management, another one you guys brought up, you guys did a great job, is, making sure that you are accountable for being on time, not only to meetings, but for your deliverables. And so if you don't have a team near you that's keeping you accountable, how are you able to do it? And so you have to find ways to showcase that you are accountable and showcase that you have plans in place. And we're going to talk about that communication piece a little bit in a few slides, but that's really important. Strong communicator, right? We've talked about this already a couple times, and you mentioned it in the chat, but having that empathy, being able to effectively communicate, being clear, making sure people understand direction, or asking questions when there isn't clarity. It goes both ways, especially when you are not in an environment where you can just quickly say, hey, Sarah, what was that? I didn't quite hear that. Or what were the instructions? It's making sure that you can confidently communicate in both directions with your manager and your team And it's quite an umbrella skill, to be honest. And language skills fall underneath it. The empathy piece falls within it. So it's a pretty big one and incredibly important. Being proactive, so it touches upon that accountability piece that I spoke about. So not waiting for your boss or supervisor to say, hey, Tom, where are you on this? Or could you start this initiative? So having that proactive ability, even when you're working from a home office, is important and not always easy, right? It's a different environment, and some people get their energy in different ways. They get them from people, they feel that support from their team, and they get energized. And so when you are working remotely, it's just a different feel. And so you may have to adapt to that. Being a quick learner, right? Like I said earlier in the conversation, we had to pivot here at Hult very quickly, get online, get virtual. And so being able to pick up different platforms, processes, etc., is important for companies. They don't want to waste too much time falling behind. They need somebody who can pick things up quickly. So that's something to think about. Being organized. When you're at a home office or you're at a coffee shop and you're working, it's very easy to not be organized and to, be thrown many projects at once. I know Sarah and I can certainly talk about working on many different things at once. It's not always easy, but you have to find a way to stay organized and prioritize. And so that's something that, without a doubt, companies are going to ask you about, certainly on interviews and informational networking conversations as well. Very, very important to how do you stay organized. Ability to multitask, I did talk about this a little bit already, but a lot of projects are going to be coming your way with remote work. And then flexible and growth mindset. I touched upon this in terms of that adaptability and that being an agent of change here at Hult. Growth mindset is like the mantra, and we talk about it all of the time. We talk about it in the classroom, outside the classroom, and then a very, very high level, because it's a bit of a in-depth term. You can really go pretty deep with it. Is being flexible, being adaptive, being solution-oriented, and really trying to find that positive aspect and solution to a problem, and not putting yourself in a box and not putting a problem in a box, but thinking outside of it. And how do you think creatively with a growth mindset? And so that's something that is also very important. As you can see, a lot of companies are dealing with that right now. They're having many challenges that they've never faced before because of COVID. And they're trying to think creatively as, how do we survive? How do we do this? How does our business thrive? And so they would love somebody with a growth mindset to help them find these solutions. So now that I've covered some of those, you might be thinking to yourself, Tom, totally get it, makes sense, but how do I get these skills, right? You just covered a lot of skills, and I did. And I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I want you just to take it in and reflect on it. There's no need to panic if any of you are getting anxious. There's plenty of time to kind of skill up. And if you do need to skill up, there's simple ways to approach that. And one is just, as simple as utilizing some of the platforms that we're using right now, such as Zoom, Skype, or Slack, or Teams. And with your colleagues or even friends, test these platforms out, and make sure you're familiar with them. You know how to use them. You're comfortable with them. That's one easy way to make sure that you can communicate effectively in remote work. Getting involved in student governments or leadership roles on your campus. Here at Hult, we call it HSA, the Hult Student Association, across all the campuses. Each campus has their own. And, it's a great opportunity to have a leadership role. You are enhancing many of those skills that I've talked about. And if you don't have them, you're building them. And if you do have them, you're certainly enhancing them. So that's a great thing to think about. And whether you're, not in college yet, or currently in college, or you're potentially in a role right now outside of school, think about, are there opportunities where you can take leadership roles? Volunteer is another great one, right? So volunteer, you can certainly work on the communications piece, the project piece, the proactive piece. There's a lot of stories that can come out of that. So when I work with students one-on-one, and Sarah, I'm sure you can also attest to this, is that some students will say, Tom, but I don't have any experience, and I can't write a CV or a resume, or I don't know what I'm going to talk about. There's actually a lot you can talk about. There's a ton, right? And that's what we work with you on, and that's what we love to kind of have those conversations with you. And so something as simple as maybe some volunteer work, there should be some great stories from there. And so you're going to hear us talk about storytelling a couple times throughout the rest of this presentation. And that is something that sounds a little silly, you know, like storytelling, but it's super, super important with the job search and how strategic you are. The more stories you have about your experience and about your skills and how you can add value is going to position you incredibly well when you're ready for that job search and ready for that next step. Becoming a student ambassador, right? So if you come to Hult, we have ambassador roles that work with different departments, such as careers, like Sarah and I, or maybe student services, right? And so, you know, maybe you are a student ambassador for the student services team, and you are working with them on events and creating events on campus. You are now upskilling, and you are really enhancing those skills on how to approach that. So that's an option. Being active in clubs and societies, or starting a club, right? That covers almost all the skills, many of the skills that I talked about. Leveraging team projects, right? So as I said, team projects are one of the kind of cornerstones or foundations that I think within education. And at Hult, they do a lot of that. And so you are in teams with people from all around the world, different backgrounds, different experiences, different language ability, different cultures, different views. And so going through that is fantastic for your career. It can be challenging at times, but that's real life. You know, you're going to be working with people from different backgrounds and experiences and viewpoints. And so, you know, leveraging those pieces and then learning how to communicate it, which Sarah's going to talk about momentarily, hugely important. And then last but not least, internships, right? So many of you, you know, may have internships already. If you, that's wonderful. If you don't panic. There's many ways to gain skills. Internships is one of them. It helps you build your network, and it helps you gain confidence, which is super important. And it really helps you identify what it is you really do want to do. And here at Hult, like, we are huge advocates of doing internships during the program. Not only does it set you up for success, but it also allows you to learn more. And so we are huge advocates of that, and it's a great way to upskill in areas of interest. Yeah, so with that said, I'm going to hand it over to
there's a lot of internships being made available because of remote working right now. I think we were talking about that in our last session. You know, there's a lot of demand for remote work internships, which can give students experience working with companies from all around the globe. So that's an exciting prospect to definitely check out if you haven't done one before. Cool. So now we know the skills that we want for remote working. We understand the landscape. What's our next step? Well, your next step is, you know, translating that to communicate your value. And what do we mean by communicate? When we talk about communicating your value, we're talking about those important tools that are used to tell employers about you, your professional brand. And what we really want you to start thinking about is, not only are you tailoring it for that specific role and industry that you want to work for, you're also trying to tailor it and adjust it for the remote work profile. So thinking about all those wonderful skills that we've just been discussing. So the two big ones, the most commonly used core tools in terms of recruitment is, of course, your CV or your resume, depending on what you want to call it, and your LinkedIn profile. So, you know, it's pretty much guaranteed most employers, recruiters will want to see either of these documents. because it gives them a great snapshot of your skill sets and your previous experience. So in terms of really tailoring it for remote work, it's important to highlight any relevant remote work experience that you have had. So whether you've worked at home before, you've worked off-site in a different location away from your normal office. It's really important to input that, whether it be within the role title, the specific location, or even in the role description there. And it can include, lots of different other avenues as well. So if you've done independent consulting before, if you've done any freelancing, or any other occasion where you've had to work at a distance from others. So working in a global team, for example, like Tom and I, that's really showing you can work across and collaborate across different time zones. Even you guys sitting in on this webinar, right? You've clearly used your time management skills to make sure you check your time zone and arrive on time. So, that's really one important thing you can do. And again, to make it clear for employers, use those keywords that will just jump out at them. Like we saw on that in-demand skills list, time management, organizational skills, use what's in those job descriptions and in that remote work profile, and bring it to life. Give them specific examples about how you've used those skills. So as Tom said before, storytelling is really important. It builds your credibility. It's so they believe you, they know you have those organizational skills because of that time you organized an event for 100 people within a week deadline. It really helps to tell your story so they understand how you've done that. And being really results orientated, giving them numbers, that helps you do that. It helps employers understand your value. What do you have to bring to the table? So again, we're circling back to that idea. Think like the employer. How are you going to help them? How do you make an impact? How do you add value? And again, you can apply these ideas, for example, to your elevator pitch. So your elevator pitch is, what would you say if you met the CEO of your dream company, or perhaps an exciting contact within your industry network, and you wanted to tell them about you? You can tailor it again towards those achievements, telling them about those exciting things that you've done that show you can deliver in this environment. And then we have there, finally, an online portfolio. So again, as part of that storytelling, bringing it to life. Don't just say it, display it, so to speak. There's lots of ways you can show the output that you create, the product of all your hard work. So again, depending on what kind of industry that you're looking for, there's lots of ways you can go about this. But for example, marketing, social media, you can set up Squarespace sites or Wix, or adding links to those social media accounts that you've created, just to really show that work that you've done. Perhaps you are upskilling in coding and programming, and you can develop a GitHub platform where you can show that and really show employees exactly what skills that you've been using and what that's been generating. If you've written articles, you can not only post them on an online portfolio, you can add the links to your CV, your LinkedIn. So there's lots of ways you can really flesh it out to bring it to life. And that's something that we work really closely with students on at Hult. So we run workshops on all of these things, but also we're there to support them and show them how they can really effectively communicate those strengths. Cool.
All right. So, we're on our last slide now. I just wanted to kind of summarize some of the things that we spoke about. So bottom line is that the landscape of work is changing, and what are you going to do about it, basically, right? What's your approach? How do you change your approach? How are you more strategic? Understanding the market and what skills are in demand. So we reviewed many of the skills. You guys came up with a bunch yourself, which was fantastic. but understanding that market and what's in demand, and then where do you meet in the middle, with your interests and your skill set and the demand, how do you marry the two? And so really thinking about that will help you be strategic and hopefully find you a role that is not only beneficial to a company, but something that you actually enjoy doing. And that's the goal. Engaging in activities that will strengthen and hone these skills, right? So it's absolutely okay if you don't have some of these skills at the moment. There's plenty of ways to develop them and strengthen them, etc. And so we reviewed some of those today. Some can be as simple as leveraging things that you have going on right now, such as maybe classwork or volunteer, or student services. Student government type roles. Or if you're a professional, leveraging some of the projects in your current role and maybe doing some stretch projects. Certain things like that can certainly help with these skills and give you a lot more stories to tell. Speaking of the story piece, is that, at the end of the day as well, if you can't communicate your value, people don't know that you have it, right? And so you have to know how to effectively communicate through your resume and CV, your LinkedIn, your personal pitch, and those online portfolios that Sarah was talking about, right? So a lot of it does come down to storytelling. We work with students one-on-one on how to approach it, how to have that conversation, how to answer something without sounding like you're bragging. I know we get that a lot too, and it makes total sense. So we work with you kind of on the finesse aspect of answering those kind of questions, making sure people know who you are, your background, what you can bring to the table, and what you're looking to do going forward. So with that, I'm going to bring it to the last slide, which is the Q&A. And
yes, I can see we've got a few questions in the chat box, which is great. In the Q&A box, so we'll come to that. I just did see in the chat box, guys, someone inquired about a WhatsApp group to join. Perhaps have a chat to the enrollment advisor. I'm not sure if there's one been set up for people joining virtual skills, but maybe that's a great place to inquire and see if there's a WhatsApp group you can join together.
Yeah. Already networking, I love it.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Okay, so let's go to our Q&A box. Our first one, how do companies deal with the negative sides of remote working? People don't work just because of earning money. How can companies provide other benefits to the employees? That's a really great question, and I'm glad you've mentioned that. I think, Tom, you alluded to that a little bit earlier. Especially what we do in career development is we want people to find meaningful careers that they enjoy waking up every day and get excited to go to. So yeah, it's not just about money. There's a lot of challenges in remote working to motivate and engage employees. So I really do enjoy this question. I can kick off from my own personal perspective, especially. I think remote work does provide a lot of opportunities to benefit their employees because it opens up things like, for example, at Hult, what we're doing now, there's a lot of amazing online training to take advantage of from sources all over the world. So employees can really tap into that. I think that's a really big one. And like I think Tom mentioned before, it gives you access to global teams as well. You are encouraged to work more closely with global peers. So I think, things like that, there's ways to tap into those benefits. Is there anything you want to add to that one, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, but just to kind of talk about some of the challenges as well is, I mentioned it earlier, and it's going to be unique to each person. But that energy piece that I talked about, that may not affect some people, it may affect other people. And that's okay if it does. You just have to find a way to make it work for you. And so, we're talking about remote work. We're not necessarily saying every role out there is now going to be remote work, but there could be some element of remote work. Maybe it's 1 or 2 times a week that you're working from home or something like that. So we're seeing that trend. And, for me, and I'll speak honestly myself, I do get my energy from people. I love when people are around me, and we're in a team environment, and we're brainstorming, and we're talking, and we're asking questions, I do get energy from the team. And so being remote can certainly have its challenges, but you have to be proactive in kind of being aware of that. So I know someone talked about being self-aware on the chat, and that's really important. And then you find ways to overcome it, and it's organizing Zoom chats or doing different things that are innovative to make sure that you are getting that exposure to people, having those conversations, and doing what you need to do. And I know a lot of companies out there are doing a lot of like happy hours and doing a lot of fun things virtually to try to create that community environment. And then we're really just kind of at the beginning of it. So there's going to be a lot of interesting, I think, innovative things that are going to come out of this.
Definitely. Great. Oh, great. I'm seeing that there's loads of questions here, guys, which is fantastic. I'm not sure if we're actually going to manage to get through them all in this session, just because we do have a limited time, but we'll try our best. So apologies in advance. I've just seen them flooding in. How have internships been shaped by remote working? Yes, massively. I mean, that's a big part of what we do at undergrad as well. We help our students find internships. Again, it's about adapting your job plan and being strategic. So I think, the landscape has been impacted by the pandemic. I know some unfortunate students who have lost their internships because they're not able to go into the workplace. However, it's opened up other opportunities where they can work online, and there's industries that are sadly thriving from this terrible pandemic. So yeah, again, a quick answer to that one: targeted job search plan, which we absolutely love doing at Hult.
Yeah, and it's opened up a lot of challenges, what we both talked about, which opens up opportunity to solve them.
Yeah.
And so if you are thinking strategically and you are identifying what the problems are for a particular business that you might be targeting, particular company, have a couple of conversations, and then you create your own internship, create your own opportunity by offering a potential solution or a project you can work on. So there's always opportunity, just have to find it.
Yeah. The next one: how to gain the confidence of customers at a startup company in this pandemic situation. Well, that's a really juicy one. That's a great one. I actually feel like for this, you might benefit from next week's webinar. So just a little shout out for next week's webinar. It's how to reinvent your business to thrive after a crisis. So this one might be applicable for you. So definitely register for that, because they might touch on how businesses are really trying to regain the trust of their customers during this time. So hope you don't mind. We might kind of skip on that one because I feel like you'll get the expert professors on it next week. Many companies expect the pandemic to die down and are optimistic. Are companies going to fully integrate online, or are they just using a pause strategy? Great question. And to be honest, I can only speak from a career development perspective, from talking to employers and recruiters. I think they're very much working it out, and it's very individual to the business depending on what industry they're in, and what their financial conditions are like, their operations. Yeah, so that's a very tricky one, I think, to be able to give a straight answer to.
Yeah, I think it's unfolding as we speak. So there's some question marks there, but I personally think there's probably going to be some type of kind of hybrid role where a lot of companies, like Twitter that Sarah mentioned, where they are encouraging some of their employees to work from home maybe once a week or something like that. And so, we'll learn more as time goes on, but it's certainly changing the landscape.
Definitely. You mentioned remote working, which is great. What can you say about online studying? Many of the top universities are starting to provide online education programs. Do you think it's effective? Well, I mean, Hult, we're doing limitless learning now. So I think, definitely from our point of view, there's a lot of value in that online education. And hopefully the virtual skills lab is giving you a taste of what that's like. How have companies managed overtime with remote working? Yeah, again, I think it's very individual to the type of company, the industry they're in, the state of play they're in. But like Tom said, I think a lot of businesses are, you know, it's still quite early days and still trying to see how that's going to work out in the long term. What jobs are the most common to work from home? There are many jobs that can't be from home, and that can be a problem to too many people. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
And one of the first ones that come to mind would be business development. So that's that encompasses many different roles, but that's typically associated with relationship building and sales. And so I think you'd probably see a large portion of remote roles as within business development, including, I'm going to include customer service in that as well. But those are roles that can certainly, for the most part, be remote. And so that's just one example, of a type of role that is very popular than remote work. And consulting is another one as well, depending on the type of consulting, of course, and what the needs are. But consulting is another great one. Yeah,
definitely. The new normal remote working need everyone to be tech savvy. Will you recommend any aspect of IT in particular? That's a great question. Yeah. So I think, again, this could depend a lot on the industry that you're looking at in terms of your target. But I think communication platforms is something that everybody needs across the board. So I think, Tom, you mentioned before, things like Zoom, which obviously is a very common communication platform. But there's a lot of project management as well. Again, it could vary throughout industry. For example, platforms like Trello, to help teams be organized. Do you have any favorites, Tom, in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, something, it depends on the business. I know some friends, they use Skype for business. Some use Microsoft Teams, some use Slack. So I know I mentioned those earlier, but those are super important, just to show that you're familiar with them. You can pick it up pretty quickly. But yeah, I would start there, and then, like Sarah said, it really does depend on kind of like what your targets are. If you're really interested in analytics, then there's software programs such as R and Python, and other ones that you'd really want to get pretty fluent in. But again, it really depends.
Yeah. As companies are downsizing, what are the opportunities for students looking for a worthwhile internship as companies are shifting their focus to saving money and cutting losses? Yes, absolutely, but don't give up hope, because again, there's a way to design a strategic job search plan, obviously depending on your particular function you want to do, what industry you want to go into, because we're seeing employers are still hiring. So it's about pinpointing those opportunities again. For example, there are a lot of smaller businesses and startups who work in thriving industries like tech, consumer products. They want to make the most of this opportunity, so they would love an intern to help them out. Depending on your particular targets, there's different ways to really focus, and that's kind of what we'd love to work with you on in terms of helping you with that. How to keep track of all the work going on as an employer. Ooh, interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is an interesting question.
Yeah. If you mean in a project management way, obviously there's lots of brilliant tools and resources. For example, I just did a shout out to Trello, which is a very simple, free platform where you can come together as a team and share tasks and track each other's progress. So that's just one idea for that. Okay, we're nearly there, guys. We might be able to make it through. We've got about 5 more questions. Tom, what do you think? I think we can do it.
Yeah, let's see if we can get through them. Yeah,
we can get through it. How do you stand out in this oversaturated market of students trying to get a job and companies not hiring? Again, that's what we're here for, targeted job search planning.
Yeah, storytelling, starting early.
Yeah.
and really taking that time to think about what is your value, what do you want to do, and then work with us on how to communicate it.
Mm.
There was one other piece that I didn't mention this as a skill, but I would say resiliency, very important, especially in the job search.
Definitely.
You will go through ups and downs, but the students who are most engaged and resilient through the process, I see are the most successful.
Yeah, that's a great one. What are the ways to strategize in preparation for the anticipated change? So I think what we can do is kind of recap some of those key themes. So when you're preparing your strategy, it's really understanding your market. So tonight we've talked about remote work in general, which is so very broad. Really understand that industry that you're going into, and really understand that particular type of role you want to do. You know, really, as we kind of mentioned, like we showed you lots of kind of wide transferable skills for remote working. You can further refine that for that particular target you want to do. And really, you know, understand those role descriptions inside out, understand how your industry's changed and what's happening with them. And then you can start pinpointing and building a really great network to steer you towards it. These are all amazing questions, guys. And this is something that we'd love to do some one-on-one coaching with each and every one of you.
I love it. It's great.
Because it's always hard to kind of generalize it for everyone. Okay, nearly there. Networking events are a major part of finding employment, and now that a lot of people are out of work and a lot of people have started to attend these events and the competition has gone up, how do you think we can develop a competitive advantage versus our peers at these events? That's a fantastic question, and I love that you're going out there networking, because definitely that's what you want to be doing during a time like this.
Yeah, I love it too. I love that you're thinking about it. Not all networking has to be kind of proper networking events. So I love that you're doing that and continue to do that. Again, that storytelling piece I think would help you in terms of your pitch when you are introducing yourself during those events. So don't forget about, you know, LinkedIn that Sarah talked about. That's a great tool to connect with people. And people right now, for the most part, not everybody, it's a little bit of a generalization, but a lot of people do have some downtime and they are missing that human interaction right now. And so it's actually a perfect time to reach out to people and have those conversations to learn a little bit more about what they do if it's a role that they're in that you think you might be interested in. Yeah. And so, you know, I love that you're thinking about the competitive advantage and the kind of value proposition, and it is super important. But just having those individual conversations is also incredibly helpful.
Definitely. You know, find those relevant contacts, tailor your pitch to show that you're really passionate about what they do and you want to learn from them. Doing that outreach will really help you stand out.
Yep.
And I think that's it from our Q&A box. Guys, we've got another question about the WhatsApp group. Yeah, maybe reach out to your enrollment advisor and just double check if there's a way to connect with everyone. One last question. In this pandemic, how has networking changed, and what are some tips to develop a bigger network as there are no human interaction in meetings and events? So yeah, again, it's awesome that you're thinking about networking. What I suggest is definitely a lot of career fairs are moving online. So at Hult, well, this week and for the past month, we've been tapping into a really large virtual careers fair. And it's fantastic. You can meet loads of companies. Sometimes it's even better than a real careers fair, because normally at a real careers fair, you might be trying to talk to a recruiter, but there's 20 other people around. When it's virtual, often you can chat to them directly in a chat box. You know, so it kind of helps that connection even more. And of course, you can follow up with people by connecting with them on LinkedIn afterwards. You know, send that really personalized touch, show that you're really keen to learn and develop that connection with them. So it's just adapting again, creating a different way of interacting with other humans. But jump on sites like there's a Bright Network, Eventbrite. Those are fantastic websites to find those virtual career fairs.
And don't forget to tap into the network you already have.
Mm.
I know some of you might be thinking, well, I don't really have a network. You probably do. You haven't quite thought of it. So like family and friends, and they know people. So making sure that you communicate your story, and you'll be really surprised, I think, of if you start doing that proactively, how many people can introduce you to other people that might be really helpful for you. So don't forget to tap into those networks that are already there.
Mm. Great. Cool. And I think that's it for the Q&A. So
Right.
that's a wrap, I think. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We've had a lot of fun doing this. So yeah, thanks for being a part of it. As we said, there'll be a recording that will get sent out over the next few days. And again, you'll have contact details. So if you do have any follow-ups, do get in touch with the guys there. And yeah, do sign up for the next webinar, which is next Friday, how to reinvent your business to thrive after a crisis. So it will be super, super interesting, I'm sure, for a lot of you. So jump on hult.edu/virtual skills to register for that one. And yeah, it's been a blast getting to know you guys through the chat box. And hopefully we'll get to see you soon.
It's been a pleasure, guys.
Great. Thank you, everyone.